Okay, we are live and rolling on eScribe and YouTube now, so we're ready to go right at 6.
Hey, Amanda, are we good to go here?
Yes, we are good to go.
All right, well, I am calling the Design Review Board meeting to order at 6 p.m. Welcome to Design Review Board meeting. All the meeting body members are attending from a remote location. We are holding this meeting virtually. So we'll be doing public comment a little differently than usual via a live call and phone line, just like calling into a radio show or to make a pledge during a telethon. I'll call for general public comment, and on that item, I will take comments on items that are not on the that are on the agenda and items that aren't on the agenda. I will also open the public comment phone lines on each agenda item. Each time we call for public comment, we'll put the numbers on the screen and the meeting ID, and give some time for you to go to your phones and call in. but you may want to write them down. When you call in, you'll be placed into a waiting room and I will take calls in the order they come in. When I call on you, please mute your TV or computer or there will be an echo. Tell us your name and your comment. Please be aware that there's a delay of about 50 seconds from what you're hearing at home and the actual meeting. So it's okay to begin speaking right away when I call on you. I'll be observing a speaking limit of 3 minutes so we can hear from everyone. Let's get started. I'd like to call the meeting of the Design Review Board to order. Can we have a roll call of members to determine who is present?
Chestnut,
Present.
Mcmillan,
Present.
Hop,
Present.
Smith,
Present.
Thane,
Present.
Briggs, absent, Prinzing,
Present.
Slobod.
Present.
All right, we have enough members. We do have a quorum.
All right, I will move on here. Welcome to all the new members. I feel like it's been a pretty big turnover. And I will ask for your patience in advance as I am not normally the chair. And I'm going to handle this so that we can get a chair and vice chair voted on this evening. Let's see here. So approval of minutes. Sorry, I've got a few things going on here. We are now on the approval of minutes. If you'd like to comment on this item, I'm going to open the phone lines. I guess we don't, Amanda, we don't need to open the phone lines for approval of minutes, do we?
No, I don't believe so. Just members that wish to make any changes to the current minutes as they stand.
Okay. Are there any members that would care to make changes or amendments to the meeting amendments as they stand? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Public comment. Do we have any comment from the public at this time? I'll give a minute or so since we are on delay for people calling in remotely. All right, seeing no public comments, we'll move on to staff announcements. Amanda, do we have any staff announcements?
Can I jump in here and
Sure.
just this is Ben Brewer with the staff, and I can't start my video, and I'm guessing it's that way for other folks. I'm wondering if that's a control we might be able to throw on.
That function did just get updated, so you all should be able to start your videos.
Thank you, Amanda.
And Emily or Ben, did either of you guys have any staff announcements?
No staff announcements.
Okay, well, moving on, we have public hearings. Appear to be no public comments. Old business. Staff, do we have any old business to address?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to new business. First off, we are going to elect a new design review board chair. And Amanda, are you going to take us through this, or?
I was going to say, if any of you members feel that you are looking to elect a particular individual, this would be the time that you can elect someone. And then as long as that person is present, they can accept the election. And then we'll go ahead and do a final vote for that chair member to take place at the next meeting.
Okay. So nominate.
Correct.
What you meant.
Nominate. Now you would nominate your chairs and they can accept that nomination and we'll vote for the final nomination at the next meeting.
So I'll open it up to the board if there are any, would any board members like to nominate another board member for chair?
I'm unsure if this is out of order or not following Robert's rules, but I thought maybe a quick introduction to the new board members, because yes,
yeah,
we're a small community, but I don't know who all's on the call. Sort of, I know most of you.
That would be a great idea, particularly since we've had such a big turnover.
Thanks, Ryan.
Well, I'll start off. My name's Ryan Smith, landscape architect here in town. I've been on the design review board for 4+ years now, 5 years. And we want to just maybe go around down the line. Brandon.
Hi, my name is Brandon Prinzing. I'm an architect, and I have served on the design review board for a few years. I took a absence for a little while because of my residency requirements, and now I'm back. So, hi everyone.
Levi, you want to introduce yourself?
You bet. Hey everyone, I'm Levi. I'm an architect. First time obviously, and really happy to be involved. Looking forward to it.
Heather?
I'm Heather Mcmillan. I'm an architect, but I am also employed at Homeward, a nonprofit here in Missoula that works statewide in homes that people can afford development. And I am been on the design review board, I think, for a year plus. I got interested when design standards and design excellence came into play, and wanted to make sure I participated in that conversation.
And Brian, you're a new member. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brian Topp. I'm an architect with Cushing Terrell, formerly CTA, and I'm getting involved here just same as Heather. Design excellence piqued my interest in just being part of helping shape the future of design in Missoula.
Thanks, Brian. Maria?
Hi, I'm Maria Chestnut. I am a structural engineer with Morrison Merrily, and I, like others, was very interested when it shifted more towards the design excellence piece. I've been on the design review board for, I think, about 2 years now, and it's been interesting to work through this transition. So, and it's fun to see new faces. Oh, also quickly, as we're breaking the Roberts rules, I would be interested when we go back to it if anybody does want to be the chair as well, instead of just nominating other people. Just put their hat in the ring.
And Karen, a new member, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Karen Slobod, and I'm a designer. I work with architects, and what I do is my specialty is branding and wayfinding signage, architectural rendering, and concept development at the beginning of projects and presentation books and things like that. So kind of came in through the side door, but also have a real fascination for smart planning and form-based codes and all kinds of some of the newer tools that we have to make the city really great. And so I wanted to participate in this for that reason.
Thanks, Karen. Ron, another new member. Would you introduce yourself, Ron? Is Ron with us?
Wonder if miking him might be a thing.
I'm with MCAT.
Oh, okay. Right.
Oh, gotcha. And all right, so that's all the new members then?
Yes, that looks like that was all the new members there.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Ron. I saw your name on there.
I see Zoe Osborne. I'm not sure if she's a member from the public or just attending to listen in.
Hi, yeah, I'm a student and it's kind of a project I have to do for class, but I'm also really interested in what you guys have to say. Nice to meet you all.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
All right, well, back to chair nominations. Are there any nominations out there, or is there anyone that would like to be nominated? I will nominate Heather for chair if she would be interested.
Ryan, I thought you were a great volunteer to run the meeting, so it'll be something that I would entertain, but I would like to have a conversation about. I know Brian runs the AIA district meetings really well, and I can't always be at every meeting, so I just wanted to. And Brandon has background experience. I have some concerns about managing and not knowing anything about the sign ordinance and the other components of this committee, and so I'm just cautiously saying I'll entertain it, but I would like to know others' opinions about this. And I don't think we need to do a not I kind of concept. So I am one to break Robert's Rules of Order pretty frequently. So I don't know what other people's thoughts are.
I'd like to nominate Ryan Smith to be chair.
Well, thank you, Brandon. I'm going to decline. I don't think chairing is my call.
I think it would be good to have somebody chair that's been serving on the board, that has some experience with it. I personally do not have experience serving on a public board in this facet, so I would also, I would nominate probably Heather or Brandon.
I'll nominate Brandon. Sorry, my child's making pizza and screaming at me. I also, Brandon has been on the board before and has great experience.
Brandon, I don't know your level of interest, but I would entertain co-chairing, and I know that's not really a thing, but if they need if I look at the agenda, we need a chair and a vice chair. We could flip a coin.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that sounds good. I wasn't expecting to step up tonight, but maybe Heather. Yeah, I think that does make sense to have someone that's maybe been on before. There's really 4 of us that have served, so I would be willing. Yeah.
Thanks, Brandon. So Amanda, do we nominate members for vice chair separately?
Yeah, we can move on to the vice chair, and then if somebody wants to speak up to nominate Heather as they did in this item, we can go ahead and get that on the record for the vice chair nominations.
I will nominate Heather for vice chair.
I'll accept that.
Okay, so we currently have 1 accepted nomination for chair and 1 accepted nomination for vice chair. Are there any other nominations among board members? Seeing none, we will, and Amanda, I'm going to ask for your help again here. Do we, if we only have 1 person nominated on each, how do we proceed?
I will go ahead, and the next meeting we have, I will go ahead and get a vote set up so that we can officially say aye and nay. This can allow some time because I know it's non-traditional. I wasn't expecting the chair and vice chair to not be reappointed, so I apologize for that. And then I will also say, since no one is the common chair, that for the record, Donald Briggs is joining the meeting now, so we have an additional member available. So if you guys do want to discuss with Mr. Briggs what you guys just went over, and maybe he would be willing to accept the nomination as well.
I heard most of that. I'm sorry that I'm so late getting on. I was having some technical problems on my desktop, so I'm on my iPad now, which I'm more used to. I did hear most of that, so I've been on for a while. You couldn't see me. Sorry about that.
It's all good. Donald, would you mind introducing yourself?
Certainly.
That'd be great.
My name is Don Briggs. I'm an architect here in town. Been in Missoula about 5 years. I wanted to be part of this board so that I could be involved in the lifeblood and the pulse of the city and the design in the city, and have some influence in some say. And anyway, so I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Donald. Welcome aboard. So a question to staff, just to reiterate, we're still going to vote next meeting on chair and vice chair, even though we only have 1 nomination of each.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. Sorry, bear with me here, everybody. I am having some technical problems now. Sorry, everybody. I've lost I'm not able to see the agenda.
That's all right. I think, Ryan, just to throw you a little life support, I think if we're not electing under new business, if we're pushing the vote for chair and vice chair to next meeting, then I think we're moving on to the staff's presentation around the design excellence review. So if it's easier to just to turn that over to Ben and Emily.
That sounds good. Ben, are you ready for the presentation?
Yeah, we are. Thanks for having us. Can you hear me okay and come through all right? Great. Well, I'm going to share my screen here if I can. And okay, does everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. We are here to present on the Missoula on the Design Excellence Overlay. My name is Ben Brewer, and my coworker Emily Gluckin is here as well. And as I've been in this meeting, I've realized that many of you have seen a lot of this presentation before and are probably already fairly familiar with this. So I apologize to those of you that some of this is a repeat. I tried to make it more specific for this board specifically, and I definitely want to be able to devote time to what the role of the board is and kind of what the process for a board review would look like. But I might try to speed through some of this a little faster than I might have intended before. So we were thinking that we'd stop a couple times along the way for questions. And so we'll try to make room for that as we go. There's also the raise your hand function, and I believe Ryan can see that. And so Ryan, feel free to stop me at any point if a question comes up. And I just want to say that for some of you who like you said, you joined the board last year or a little while ago. This is late in coming to you, so thanks for your patience on that. And as you probably realized, there haven't been any design excellence projects that have actually come to the board yet. And part of the reason we've been putting this training off is because we knew that there was a new round of recruitment coming, and it didn't make sense given that there were no projects in the queue. We thought we'd wait until the new board members were with us to all go through it together. And so it's great to hear there's interest in this, and hopefully this is informative and interesting, and I hope that it leads to some conversation about it as well. So I will just start off with the agenda. We're going to basically introduce the overlay and go through the strategy behind it and what it's trying to achieve. Go through what's in the overlay itself as far as the standards and the design manual. Talk about how we evaluate projects based on these materials that are in the overlay. Talk about the different levels of review, and then we're hoping to end this with a discussion about the role of the design review board, and also take you through a few examples of projects that have come through for review and are in the process of, or even close to being finished, being built, and then reserve some time for questions and conversation after that. I am aiming to get through this hopefully in not more than half an hour or 40 minutes. That's what we're shooting for. So hopefully that works for you. And again, we want to make sure that any questions you have get answered, and then we talk about the things that you want to talk about.
Hey, Ben, are you able to make the presentation full screen?
Yeah, how would
on the full screen then?
How do you do that, Emily?
Go to view at the top.
Okay.
Full screen mode.
Full screen mode. Oh, that is better.
Thank you.
Emily talked me into using a PDF instead of a PowerPoint, so this is a new one for me. Okay, we're gonna just jump in here. Why did the city adopt the design excellence overlay? There are a few reasons, but the big context, or the big part of the history, is that a few years ago, that the level of community concern and conversation about development in Missoula grew to the point that it became a political issue. There was a lot of conversation about design, impacts of design, some specific projects, some about the impact of design in general. And that led to a city council initiated project to investigate and look into commercial design standards, and that led to the development of the overlay. The process also took the opportunity to fold some of the recommendations and initiatives that had that were included in other plans ahead of this and into this project. So that included the growth policy and the downtown master plan, and so it was also an opportunity in a way to implement some of those outstanding goals. The overlay is it consists of a few components and kind of shifts in how we think about and do things with regard to design and growth and development in the city. Fundamentally, it's a vision for high quality development and urban form within certain parts of the city, including commercial corridors and the downtown. One important shift that is included in this is a move away from our traditional use-based standards that are in our Title 20, or there were originally in Title 20 before this, to more of a place-based approach. And then it also includes an entire management system that goes beyond just zoning standards, but to include also design guidelines, different types of review based on thresholds, and a series of, or a set of incentives that are built into the overlay. So I'm going to run through the strategy that was developed through the process of developing the overlay. I think it helps to understand what the intent is and what why it includes the different components that it does. So first of all, there was part of the strategy was to tailor the different areas in the overlay to different contexts. And those were identified through the public engagement process and the project development, and eventually landed in a series of sub-districts within the overall overlay area. And those are distributed between the downtown area and the commercial corridors within the city. And second, another component of the strategy is that within those different contexts, that the standards that the overlay is implementing would be applied at more or less rigorous scales, depending on the sensitivity of those contexts. The overlay would implement or include two tiers of standards. One would be prescriptive standards like you typically associate with zoning, that are quantifiable and kind of black and white checkbox type standards that you read them and you know what they are and how to measure them, and they're kind of easily administered. But it would also incorporate or allow for design guidelines, which allow for more flexibility, creativity, that are more qualitative in nature. And then another component of the strategy is an applicability by threshold. And so that was conceived in different ways, as far as geographically where the project might be happening, what scale the project was at, if it included certain incentives or not. And so that was another part of the strategy. And then finally, this set of incentives would be incorporated as well to both attract better development in the area and help offset to some degree some of the more rigorous standards that it might include. So that includes a fair amount of things, some of which are new to us, new to our zoning. But generally it included waivers for parking or parking exemptions, and then reductions of landscaping or activity area requirements. And finally, what we consider one of the incentives, but it's kind of in a category of its own, is called a design variation. And that's something I'll talk more about in a little bit. So that's the strategy. I was going to stop there and just see if there are any kind of high-level questions or conceptual questions about the overlay. And next, I was going to go through what's in the actual standards themselves. Any questions on that? All right. So the overlay is broken out in a few ways. If we remember that the one part of the strategy was the breakup between standards and guidelines. The way that is was adopted was that the standards were incorporated into Title 20 zoning, and so this was kind of the formal document that we got for the standards, and I'll walk through what's in that a little bit more in a second. But the standards are then applied through zoning into the zoning map, and there are 9 different sub-districts that are all part of the overlay. And then these are applied by 2 different types of review based on thresholds. And so the most simple type of review is review simply for the zoning standards, which again are part of Title 20. And then the next tier of review is new to us in the city, which was called Design Excellence Review. And that it includes review for not just the standards, but also the design guidelines and the design manual. And it's a little hard to see here, but the triggers for that kind of next tier, more comprehensive tier of review are based on these thresholds that we talked about. So location, anywhere in the downtown requires this design excellence review. And then within the corridor, what's called the Typology 1 corridor necessarily requires design excellence review. And then from there, in other parts of the other corridor sub-districts, that would be based on the size of the project or potentially on some other triggers like being in a corridor node or requesting design variations. And I'll, to kind of explain that a little bit more, that leads to 2 kind of different tracks for our review. One would include just zoning compliance review that is basically the same thing as a building permit. And whereas the design excellence review includes submitting a DER, what we call a DER application, that comes ahead of the building permit review. And that includes, that's our process for reviewing the project that includes for the guidelines along with the standards. And depending on where that goes, that will then lead to the building permit review and approval. And that is also where the design review board might be involved, is where the if and when the rather than be reviewed administratively by staff, that design excellence review would go to the design review board for a final decision. Wanted to talk through what the design variation process is. That's a term that comes up a lot with design excellence, and it is it's also a new kind of system for us, a new process. A design variation is basically what would typically be called a variance, but within the overlay, the staff is granted authority to make a determination or to approve what these design variations as part of the project review. And so the general idea of a design variation is that it allows for flexibility, it allows for creativity, and should lead to an alternative approach to a design feature that is as good or better than the intent for the original standard. And those are generally reviewed based on the applicable guidelines in the design manual that relate to that, what the design variation is for, and the intent of the original standard. Once a project requests a design variation, it will get triggered. It's triggered for design excellence review. And this is where I wanted to walk through this, what's in the standards themselves. I'm gonna just to show you kind of how it's set up. So when you get to the point that you are looking through this to make, to review projects or come to decisions on yourself, that the general structure of it. This is the section that is basically adopted into Title 20. It's in Chapter 2025. It's Section 080, and so that's our overlays chapter. So this is another overlay that the city has added to its zoning. And the 080 section basically provides all the everything you need to know about what's in the overlay, how it works, how to apply it. And so the general section talks about the creation of the overlay. The big section here to know about is the applicability section. If you have a question, or there's a question of whether the overlay should be applied to a project, it will be explained here, and also how it interrelates with the rest of Title 20. Some parts of the rest of Title 20 don't apply in the overlay. Section B outlines the review process that we just went through, as far as what the thresholds are for the different levels of review, what's associated with each of those, what a design variation review is, and this also explains the role of the DRB. And Section C is a comprehensive list of all of the standards in the overlay. As you're using the or looking at standards in the that apply to a project, if there's ever any question about what it is, what the intent is, how to measure it, what the description is, it's found in this Section C. So that's as you'll see in just a sec, the way that this is set up is very streamlined for use to find the specific standards. If you have any questions about the context or the intent or anything to understand that standard better, you would look at the C section. And then finally, Section D lists the specifics for the incentives that are included in the overlay. So I'm gonna just pop out of this for a second and show what I mean about that a little bit more, in that these are the standards that we just went through, and that's again the 080 section in the overlays chapter. So the next two subsections are where you find the actual standards for whichever subdistrict you're in, right? So there are 5 downtown subdistricts and 4 corridor subdistricts. If you have a project in the inner core, you would go directly to, once you have this kind of understanding of how this works, you would go directly to the inner core standards, and they are a standalone set of standards. It's a two-page format, and it has all of the percentages, measurements, applicability. Some of them might not apply in the subdistrict, and so the specific standards themselves are there, hopefully with some helpful graphics. And then again, if you are confused about what they mean, or what need more information about what that's looking for, then you would bounce back to that Section C, to the specific description of that standard, and get all the information that you need. So again, all of the sub-districts are set up in the same way. They're meant to be pretty quick to just go to and get what you need once you have an understanding of how this is set up. And so that's a summary of the standards. I'm happy to stop there and answer any questions you have so far.
Yeah, Ben, this is Heather. I just wanted to ask you guys both. I like the design variation option, and I'm wondering, have you guys exercised that yet, or pieces of it? I mean, am I supposed to remember that because we voted on one of them or two at this committee?
No. Again,
Oh,
those.
okay.
Yeah.
just checking.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we actually have a breakdown of the projects that we've seen come through that we'll be going through at the end of this. And
great.
It talks about how many projects use design variations and how many didn't. But in short, yes, we have granted design variations. And again, that's an administrative process. So that wouldn't have come to the board yet, unless, or no projects have come to the board for those yet.
I guess, sorry, my doggy doorbells are going off.
No problem.
But I guess the reason I was asking is because I didn't remember it, but I do want to understand the nuance of the staff difference and then what we expect to see at the board and to be ready for that. Because as a developer, I'm thrilled that there's staff authorization of things. But I also know we're going to be creating a precedent every time we go forward. And so I just didn't know when it would come up. Through that process, we would be ready, and then you would present it with those categories and give staff recommendations. I would assume that table of contents of the sections and why you're recommending to accept it or not, that kind of thing. So, but it sounds like you're going to run us through that at the end of the project or at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that more and the role of the board that the board would play in that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions so far? Okay. So I'm gonna now run you through the design manual, and just to as a reminder, and this is really a new thing for the city, so just bear that in mind, that this has two tiers to it, and what I just ran through were the standards. Those are what are required by zoning. Every project that goes in, depending on which sub-district it in, which one applies in that sub-district, are required to do those to meet those standards, and as they're prescribed, in the zoning. What we're going to go through next is the design manual, which is what contains the list of design guidelines, basically, that can be used both to work around those standards and improve on them and shape them, but also what are our basis for something like a design variation where a specific standard in that specific place, given that specific context, just might not make sense, and there's a better way to do it. And so this is kind of where we go to evaluate whether that's the case or not. And so that, in a nutshell, this is meant to provide flexibility. It's qualitative and discretionary, and it covers site design, building design, and sign design if applicable. And again, I would just kind of note that as this project went through, something that came up again and again is kind of the spectrum, trying to create a spectrum that on the one end is certainty and on the other end is flexibility, and that we're able to land somewhere in the middle that makes sense based on the project. So to run through kind of how this is set up, there's a hierarchy of principles and concepts basically in the manual, starting at the very general with the design principles. And these are the 9 design principles in the manual that apply or that drive this drove this process or came out of this process to inform what the overlay is trying to achieve, basically. So those are to design for Missoula, encourage architectural diversity, connect to nature, respect traditions and historic resources, engage the public realm, support economic benefits and value added, implement the growth policy and focus inward, and to implement area plans. And so those at the very basic level, at the very high level general, are what this is trying, are the things this is trying to achieve. Drilling down a little bit more, there are some specific key design considerations that help to implement those things. Street level interest, compatibility with traditional character, street edge character, what materials are used, and your general building height, and so these are again seen as needing to be applied more or less rigorously depending on the context of what sub-district project might be in. And then at the most specific level are the actual guidelines themselves, and those are broken out by a general intent statement. So building orientation, this is what this is trying to do, and then the specific guidelines are listed after that. And so the way that this all fits together, and the way that we try to use this in our review and as well, and how to evaluate projects, is that each element informs the next, and one may move back up the hierarchy to gain a broader perspective. So if we're looking at a specific design guideline, we might not be able to come to a conclusion or a determination on that unless we kind of evaluate it in the context of what its intent is, how it fits into the broader design considerations, and even what the guiding principles are trying to do here, and vice versa. And then I wanted to include this to make sure that or to put out there that the design manual does include and since this board has traditionally focused on signs pretty specifically, if there's any questions on how that's incorporated into our processes and into the overlay, I'm happy to talk more about that. And then just wanted to make sure people know that the main resources for this are the Design Excellence webpage, which includes all of the documents that I've been going through, and links to the documents in the map and whatnot. And then Title 20 itself is on the Municode site, and that's where you would find all of the standards that are in Title 20. So from there, I was going to move on to the role of the design board, but I'm happy to stop again and answer any questions you might have so far. All right, seeing none, I will move on. So here's the basic breakdown of how the design review board is incorporated into this. There are basically two ways that a project might end up going to the DRB. It could be referred by staff, or it could be based on an appeal or requested by the applicant. And so the basic or the way that the board is built into this is as an alternative reviewer, or kind of a ultimate negotiator, so in situations where, or as a resource. So for example, staff may choose to refer a project to the board because it's complex and because it is something that would benefit from the type of experience that the members on the board bring and have. But it could also be that, well, I'll get into some more specifics on that. But the other reason would be that we try to do this administratively, and some of you have gone through the design review experience and know that it can be there's some back and forth. It involves some working through things together and some negotiation, and there is the option or the opportunity on the part of the applicant to prefer or request to be reviewed by the design review board rather than staff. And then again, this is where an appeal of staff's decision would go. If we get to an ultimate place where we just are not seeing eye to eye, we cannot find a resolution to a project. this would be the next step for an applicant. And then the scope of what the board would look at is fairly flexible from and this is our understanding of this, so far. Some projects they might include an entire, or a review of the entire project. Other projects might have gotten to the point where staff and the applicant have progressed as far as they could, but there are still some outlying issues, and that's what we need to get a final decision on, and that's what the board would be looking at specifically. And so this is the language from the overlay. An appeal is brought up by the applicant. A referral that it would be by staff, and this is just mainly to point out that there are some specific situations where staff is guided to consider using the board. So unusually shaped sites, complex architecture, significant amount of design variation requests, or high potential for detrimental impacts on immediately abutting residential neighbors. So that's what's written into the code. We're not limited to that, but those are kind of what's in there to guide us most specifically. And then just the final thing to point out is that the review criteria that you would be looking at for a project comes out of the overlay. It's not the criteria that you typically use in the design review board that's listed in that chapter in Title 20. For an appeal, an applicant is making a case that the design review board erred in our determination and review of their project. And so you would be reviewing for our our review of where our review of a project might have gone off or erred. A repeal what am I looking at here? A repeal. And then the other set of criteria you'd be looking at is specifically the overlay, the guidelines in the overlay and the manual, and how it and if there are design variations included, how they meet those and the intent of the standards. So that's what I had for the role of the DRB, and then we are of course happy to talk about that more about and get into the specifics of it. And then Emily also was hoping to take you through some of the a summary of the projects to date and a look at some specific projects as kind of case studies. And Ryan, do you have any preference on whether we keep going or you want to stop for more discussion about the role of the board?
I did a quick check there, Ben, and I'm not sure Ryan is still with us. Is he there? He is there. No?
He's there. He's on mute, I think.
He's on mute. Okay.
Sorry,
perfect.
I was muted. I didn't realize.
He disappeared out of my view. So okay.
I guess I would suggest to open it to if anybody has any questions, and if they don't, we can keep moving forward.
Great.
I have a question for Ben. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of kind of the history behind the sort of two different approaches where it's both, reviewed by staff or then, through the design review board, and kind of the history with that decision making? And maybe this was used in the making or what have you, but I think it's just useful for us to all know kind of what the thinking is with staff and how that came to be, because working in other jurisdictions, it's sort of done differently. And why was this advantageous for Missoula? So just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. When you say that it was advantageous for Missoula, do you mean the extent to which we've used or not used the board? Or?
Yeah, correct. Like with the I attended a few open houses when the guidelines were being crafted, and it seemed collectively that folks in the community really wanted some flexibility in this approach, and that didn't want every project to be able to, or to have to go to the design review board, like say in Whitefish or Bozeman. Those sort of are done differently, and I'm not advocating one way better than the other, but it's definitely crafted differently here in Missoula. And so it seemed like it was better fit for the community to do it this way. And I'm just wondering, and so that's one question. The second sub question would be, in your opinion, why do you think that there hasn't been a project brought in front of the design review board since the guidelines have been put in place? That I'm personally just very curious about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I think that's a great question and point to make. That was a feedback that came up during the outreach, public engagement phase of the process to get this going or to develop this. And again, there's a lot of talk was there was a lot of talk about the kind of the spectrum of flexibility and certainty. A lot of talk about how to that I think it was clear that this was something that was wanted. It was also clear that there was some skepticism about what the implications of something like this would be for development costs and time, the implications for review timelines and impact to the development community that were seen as onerous. And so I think, some of that came out of the kind of that balancing act of trying to find something that would work to some degree for everybody. And so, I think we're probably on the more flexible side as far as the level of kind of board review and it it's compared to other communities, like you were saying, and that sounded like that was the preference from that was coming in during the comment period. I think what was appealing about this was the level of flexibility and creativity that it could allow for, and that's kind of what's exciting about it and different as far as an approach to have, because and again, this is like my spiel, I guess, or the thing I like to bring up about this, but design as was evident when this kind of came up as an issue in the community and was something that was being talked about a lot and brought out a lot of emotion and a lot of disagreement. Design is a really hard thing to find common ground on sometimes, and to figure out a way to talk about it and look at it in a way that people can find agreement. And it just is something that brings out a lot of emotion and people feel strongly about. And so one of the benefits of this, I think, is that it creates kind of a common language, a common basis for us to base those disagreements in, and at least look at a shared text, I guess, of what we are trying to, why we're trying to do what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I think there was there was a need for something like this, or at least for elevating the conversation about design in the community. But I think there was also concern that it would be too heavy-handed or be at the point that it was too restrictive to good design. And so coming out of that, I think we were on the staff side given a pretty clear, heavy indication as far as what the hope was, is how this was implemented, that the attempt should be to try to reach resolutions on design at the administrative level. just to set the course for this, and that was kind of indicated as a goal, and I think there was also some consideration as part of that in order to use the board effectively, there was some recruitment and additional expertise and skills that were needed to make that workable. Did that answer both your questions? Sorry, I went off there a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Ben. I would just sort of piggyback and add to what you were saying about the nuanced part of design. I couldn't agree more. And I might encourage other board members to say to ourselves that, when a future applicant comes to the board, that we somehow have to assure the community that we are design-minded and flexible and not a burden, more of a conversation about quality design in the community. Because I think if we can get that out into the community, because I know other peers of mine have purposefully been shy of doing the appeal process through the design review board because of that fear. And it's going to continue to come down to staff to review design nuances. And when that becomes a question, I would sure hope that with a streamlined process and applying to present to us, that there would be a continuing open conversation about the quality of design in that particular project. And the design review board, in my opinion, should just become, if it can't be worked out through staff, then it just gets kicked to us as a last resort. It should be, in my opinion, viewed as an equal opportunity to further design conversation in our community. And I would hope that at some future date that would be that the board would review more projects.
Brandon, yeah, this is Heather. I wrote notes and was waiting to say exactly the same thing. I agree with you, and I'm glad I poked you and said you had to help play with me on this, because the reason I joined I had thought about it, but once this came out and I was heavily invested in the process where we got here, I was like, we need to be able to implement this in a way that's approachable, but also I know the projects that were the lightning rods, why I believe in design standards. I know I'm not supposed to say that word, but if they're implemented the right way. And that's where I think we can be part of the system that makes the overall work, and that there's if you educate us on what you guys are deciding as staff and find the right levels and we go back and forth, we can work together and be approachable by the community. And I would hope that it's qualitative and subjective, and that's okay. But as long as we can work through it and have good dialogue, I think that this can be a really helpful tool for you guys as staff too. And the community will then know that it's not I've had a great experience in Whitefish and a challenging experience in Bozeman, but I still believe in both those processes. So I like the approach the city has taken with this back and forth. So I appreciate that, and thanks to both of you for speaking at that level.
I'd like to add that I've worked with, I think, about 8 different communities, different cities, different states, and each one of them had something sort of like this and had a design review board. When the city gets to a certain size, without having that, it seems like there's not the protection that you need from things like the Verizon building. So anyway, I've seen it uniformly used across all the different projects and places that I've worked.
And I was going to have some similar comments to Brandon. It's just like, how do we help kind of break down that barrier, or is it a responsibility of us to do that? I don't really know, but either way, try to make it so it's not, doesn't seem like a punishment almost to go to the design review board, that it's a a positive experience, but we also have a positive impact through that experience.
Yeah, and I would imagine that we would evolve over time. I would hope that we get to hear what you guys have seen come through, the conversations you've had. You'll train us, and maybe we'll adapt and evolve as we grow as a useful tool in the overall. So.
Hear, hear.
Thanks. That's great feedback, and it's definitely something that we heard from the consultants in developing this. Is that there should be a feedback loop between staff and the board, and that one of the functions of the board is to help set some precedents and provide those kind of baselines for staff to be able to refer back to. I wanted to, I just wanted to take a second, and Karen, you reminded me, and so I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that the design manual is full of many beautiful pictures that were graciously offered by Karen, and so we really appreciated that, and they look great. So thank you, Karen.
Glad to see them up. Makes me happy.
Is there any other questions on that or comments you want to make? Otherwise, it might be helpful to get a sense of how much this has kind of been used in the city so far. I'm going to turn it over to Emily here.
Thanks, Ben. And yeah, really good feedback. And I think this definitely opens up a good channel for conversation between reviewing staff and the board to talk about how we want to use this partnership. And I mean, I think it's the case where maybe we did have some projects that would have been great candidates for design review board, but were instead reviewed administratively. So going forward, maybe we can kind of recalibrate our approach and figure out how to make it more functional. Yeah, as Ben mentioned, I'm going to walk you guys through just kind of where we are today, starting with some statistics that we've been gathering since 2019. And then following this, I'll go through some case studies of projects that we've done. But to start off, since the overlay was created in 2019, we have approved 28 permits or 28 design excellence reviews. There are currently 5 under review, and around 5 have come in for pre-application meetings, which is before submitting the design excellence review application, but they're projects that we've kind of received indications that are in the proposal stage. Can you go to the next slide, Ben? So of those 28 that were approved, 15 of those, so over half, had design variation requests. And then 13 of those were without design variation requests. And in some of the examples I'll talk through what kinds of design variations we've seen. To break it up a little bit more, we've gotten a mix across the different design excellence districts. The most frequent one by one is the inner core, which is basically city center downtown. Interestingly, we have not had any applications yet for properties within the downtown gateway, hip strip, or north districts in the past few years. So be interested to see if more of those come in at some point. And then a pretty even spread across the different typologies. And I just want to note that these numbers don't include properties that didn't meet or didn't trigger the design excellence review threshold. So we have a number of building permits that came in and had to comply with the overlay standards, but didn't need to go through the design excellence review process. And of those 28 approved applications, 5 of those have been in our designated nodes, which are key intersections or areas of the city that have been identified as part of the overlay as kind of key areas to keep an eye on and have special considerations for how we apply these standards. And those 5, 2 of them have been at the Southgate Mall, which is identified as a node. 1 is on Russell and Wyoming, so Russell Street. Another one near the intersection of Russell and Brooks, and then 1 node on Reserve Street. So now I'm going to take you through a couple of examples of approved projects that we've had, and have some nice before and after photos to show you. But to start off, this was DUR project number 1. This was the very first design excellence review that we did in the city. It was the AC Marriott Hotel on the corner of Patty Street and Main Street. It was previously a vehicle repair shop with parking in the front, and yeah, pretty vacant up on the street edge. And the proposal for the hotel included new construction with a 6-story, 105 unit hotel that looks like this. So this was their proposal, and this was ultimately their approved design. And it's under construction, but possibly nearing the end of that soon. This project did have a couple of variations, so we got some practice with those off the bat. One of note was regarding the material requirement. And I meant to mention earlier, this is in the downtown inner core, so city center. And in that area, there's a requirement that traditional masonry, so either stone or brick, is required, 70% is required on street facing and 40% on non-street facing. And in this particular case, the proposal included CMU in some areas instead of brick. And it was determined through the review that this was an appropriate substitution. Another consideration that came up during this review was the location of the entrances. So typically design excellence requires street-facing entrances, especially in the inner core. This particular building did not have an entrance on Main Street. However, it was justified to approve a variation for that because the corner that you can kind of see is all glass. It was determined that that provided an adequate connection to the public realm that an entrance would otherwise provide. So in place of that, that was deemed sufficient.
Emily,
anything to add about this, Ben?
Yeah, can I just sorry, I'm getting feedback. I just wanted to add that one of the things that is also a big change about adopting the overlay is that previously, unlike everywhere else in the city where we did already have some kind of basic commercial design standards. We had enterprise commercial standards for big developments, and we had a previously adopted set of use and building specific standards for commercial development that's smaller than enterprise commercial. None of that applied to the downtown, to the CBD area, and so this is a new thing that there are design considerations that would need to be accounted for at downtown, and the the big example of where that was not at play was the Merck redevelopment, where that was handled to some degree through kind of development agreement negotiations. But this is as far as placemaking goes, the downtown was lacking this kind of tool for to use to try to create some more of that. So just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Ben. That's a really good point. So on the same block is the Marriott Hotel, also on Main Street. And this, unlike the EC Marriott, which was new construction, this is an example of a redevelopment of an existing building. This was formerly a Days Inn. And so a similar proposal for a hotel. Ben, can you go to the next slide? So this was the first version of the proposal that we saw. And some of the challenges that came up during this review were concerns about the roof line, the materials that were proposed, the window treatments. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but they weren't quite meeting the standards and
yeah, they really tied into the kind of the design here that wanted to incorporate a mansard roof into the project, and so they had these kind of bump out window treatments that were that fit into that, and then the also as part of that kind of initial design was this more angular modern treatment of the roof, how the roof played or interplayed with the rest of the facade on that northern facade.
So this was the design that was ultimately approved, and it was approved with variations, including the building placement in the build-to zone, glazing, so amount of windows, and material coverage.
Can I ask? It sounds like it didn't have the 70% cladding with brick or masonry type materials. Did they just get a variance for that?
Do you know, Ben?
I think that was so another factor here is that's a great question, Karen. the part of this the way that we apply this, let me back up to answer your question a little bit. The way that we apply this, and this relates more to projects like this that are redevelopments or additions or just facade changes or maybe just improvements on like one part of a building or a wall, is that for one thing, our scope of review is the scope of the project, and so we don't trigger improvements beyond what the proposal is for, unless for some reason the scope of the proposal expands, and then we expand our scope of review accordingly.
This was kind of grandfathered in.
Yeah, and then the next piece of that is that there is non-conformities apply here. So that's how we view a lot of those kinds of redevelopments. And so I think that's what happened here with as far as materials. If it were a situation of having been a brick building and then converting it to this, that would be a different scenario.
Right.
And you guys all handled this as staff, all the variations, but I do remember it coming through for the sign package through Design Review Board, and it was a nicer version, kind of adapting a rule. They didn't quite follow the rules, but it was better as a net sign package and wayfinding and all those things. So that was kind of a baby step into utilizing the committee the right way. So I like it's good. This was a hard project, so I know the developers, so you guys did a good job working with them.
This one was it was tough on all sides, I think, but yeah, we got moving and we got there, and so hopefully that's.
Can I just ask who the developers are on this? I've been watching this thing come into shape, and I'm just curious. Are they the Bozeman folks, or is it?
Yeah, I can't remember their name off the top of my head. Maybe you know Ben, but
yeah, it's a Think Tank, I think, is the studio that designed this.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah,
yep.
And they have a similar hotel in Bozeman called the Lark, I believe.
The Lark.
It's a similar concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they adapted an old hotel downtown and then built a new construction out of CLTs to augment it. So, yeah, it's it's pretty severe adaptive reuse of a building. So, same in this case.
Yeah, and that was, one of the ongoing conversations about this was, on the one hand, anything done to this building was seen as an improvement, and on the other hand, it's a big impactful change, and we wanted to still address for that and to move it towards what the overlay is calling for that place. Are you ready to go to the next one?
Let's move across the street now. So this is also on Main Street. We kind of got a clump of these together at once. So also in the downtown inner core. And this is an example of an apartment building that was built above the Fantasy for Adults store.
Which is next to the Union Club, which is a historic, listed historic building.
Yep, so that, the proximity to the historic building posed some unique challenges for this particular project, just making sure the design was sensitive to that use and compatible with that historic building. I believe it was approved with no variations requested. But some of the things that changed from the first iteration to when it was approved were the use of brick, and I believe their roof line changed over time. Or was it always sloped then?
It was sloped to begin with.
Okay.
I think
that was definitely a point of discussion for staff, was whether that sloped roof line kind of fit in with the surroundings.
Yeah, I think some of what changed on this one was the incorporation of more of a step back on that second floor, and I think maintaining more of the brick as a material instead of what was originally proposed. And this is a good opportunity just for your information as well. The way that if there was a project that involved a listed historic building, that process, that review is folded into the review by the Historic Preservation Committee, and so those projects are reviewed by the HPO and through that process.
Ben, can I ask? I mean, is this in the historic overlay? I mean, it's still in the district, right? But was the building not contributing? Were there differences there? Just curious if historic had to review it at all.
Well, historic only reviews listed buildings. So contributing buildings are not under the purview of the HPC.
And I don't believe we've had any applications come in for listed buildings yet.
We did actually. The radio.
Oh, we did? Oh,
the
Radio Central, you're right.
Yeah, Radio Central. Yep.
Okay, never mind. So yeah, that would be a good example to talk about too.
Yeah.
That's a good question. All right, so also in the downtown inner core, Biga Pizza expanded to the other side onto Front Street. So this is an example of a facade modification of an existing storefront. So that's what the before looked like. And then if you want to go to the after. So yeah, this included some new materials. And one, well, this was approved without design variations, but one interesting thing to note is that this property was also subject to that 70% traditional masonry requirement. And the stone material was not authentic stone, but a material that really mimics stone. And Brandon can probably correct me if I'm saying anything.
This project exists.
This is your project, isn't it, Brandon?
Sorry, Brandon. We didn't
this is
think
very
through before.
embarrassing. I don't know why you guys show this. This is terrible.
This is going to happen because of who you put on this board. So it's going to happen.
I think
it is a great project.
An excellent example of design excellence. But yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, the material wasn't truly authentic stone, but it was a material that mimicked the texture of stone enough that it was.
Oh, it's real stone. It's real cut stone. Yeah.
Okay, I'm saying all sorts of lies tonight. So apologies.
But yeah, it wasn't brick. Was the requirement brick or a more defined stone, and this was a variation from that? It's still a stone, or I guess I'm just trying to noodle on that a little bit. Did it meet the requirement, Brandon? Yeah.
Yeah.
It did. Yeah.
It's the requirement is brick or stone, or traditional masonry, right? So the stone met that requirement.
Yep. And then another piece that was added in was in relation to one of the design guidelines for connectivity to the public realm. So the Sidewalk Cafe was added in as part of the proposal to facilitate that connection and provide some amenities on the site, right on the sidewalk there.
Yeah, and I think this is a great example of kind of, one of the specific issues that comes up, or that is constantly evolving, I would say a little bit, in as far as how we implement it for a given project is how we evaluate the materials that are used for a project, which is called out. It's a standard in the overlay, but at the same time there is both guidance given in the guidelines for alternative approaches or materials that can be used, and also that's also made available within the standards themselves, through a list of kind of alternative materials that are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And so this specifically is, I think this, going back to Brandon, what you were asking about earlier, the idea of regulating for or requiring materials was probably one of the things included in this that brought up the most consternation in the community, or at least the design community. And so there was an effort made to try to allow flexibility for that, and to a degree that would make sense or be reasonable. And so this is one of those projects that got caught up in that, and so yeah, that's again, that we try to base those decisions on the context of where the project's happening, on what the place is, what sub-district it is, what's around it, what the character is of that place, and what the guidelines prescribe.
Yeah, so during this review, since it was the downtown inner core, the use of that traditional masonry or brick or stone was important, because it's called out in both the standards and the guidelines that those materials should really be highlighted in that particular area. So that was definitely a big conversation that we had as part of the review, but it ended up great. Thank you, Brandon. Okay, so this is an example of a bigger addition on a more institutional building. And this, I think, really put design excellence to the test. This is on the St. Patrick's Hospital at the corner of Spruce and Owen Street. And this is the downtown outer core. So we're moving out of the downtown a little bit in this one. As you can see in the before picture, sorry, Ben, it was, the building is quite a bit back from the street, and then that area along the sidewalk was used for parking. Then the proposal included bringing an addition closer towards the street. You can go to the next one, Ben. So in addition, it kind of stepped down a level and then towards the street property lines. Some of the biggest challenges with this one and kind of points of discussion during the review were the presence of an ambulance drive lane between the building and the street, which is typically not permitted in the design excellence overlay. But being that this is a hospital and that was kind of a critical need, that was a variation that was requested, and it was mitigated by providing a really thick landscape buffer kind of between where that drive lane is and the sidewalk, kind of increase pedestrian safety and comfortability and provide a little bit of connection between the property and the sidewalk. Another point that came up was the materials. This one, just given the more institutional existing architecture of the hospital, there was a desire from the applicant to not stray too far away from that existing design, to have it mesh, but so it was kind of a balance between that and being able to meet those material requirements. So the mitigation for that was adding kind of some increased patterning on the panels. Previously, they matched the panels on the existing hospital. And this proposal that you see here was the approved design. There was a little bit more breaking up of those panels and different sizes to add some texture. And one other note on this project was the absence of a really defined street-facing entry. So that was one of the other variations that was requested, and the way it was kind of mitigated and able to be approved was highlighting a staff entry. You can kind of see towards the back there, there's it was highlighted with an awning, yeah, right there. And then it had a brick kind of panel above it that helped it stand out. And it was still a staff entry. And I mean, one of the biggest issues here was kind of use versus design. So this was a critical decision unit with MRI machines inside and a desire for increased safety and not really a public entrance to the hospital, where they wanted people to easily be able to get inside. So even though that wasn't an operable public entry, it was able to be highlighted architecturally and still like not be totally closed off to the public realm. Next slide. So this is the Blackfoot River Outfitters site. It's on Russell Street on the corner of Russell and Montana. It was previously vacant, and so we're moving into corridor typology 1. So the corridor guidelines are kind of a different set from the downtown guidelines, and as you move out towards the different corridors, the standards are a little more lenient, unless, you know, kind of lower percentages than what you would see in the downtown inner core, for example, but still justifiable.
Just to clarify a little bit, except for this one, this is corridor 1, which is the kind of meant to be the downtown corridor. And this is the one sub-district in the corridors that automatically requires the level of design excellence review, just to point that out.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, any property in corridor type 1 review is immediately triggered. Whereas in corridor type 3 or 4, that's where like a square footage threshold would kick it into design excellence review. So this project included new construction of a retail storefront and some additional office space for lease. There were no design variations as part of this project. And I wanted to share this as a good example of, well, first, I think this is maybe one of the first fully completed design excellence projects that we've seen. It's totally open and functional, and the business has moved in. I think it's another good example of kind of the vision for these corridors. So this building is obviously a little bit closer to the street than other buildings or existing buildings on Russell. I think it's just a good example of what this overlay is trying to achieve.
Yeah, Emily, I'd echo that corridor was kind of part of one of the drivers of the design excellence. And I don't know if you were around with the Death Star emails that went around for building not far from here, but this is a good example of taking the street front and establishing that corridor, because it's in the process of being redeveloped in a lot of projects along the way. So it's a good example, you're right.
Okay, just a few more. This property is on Brook Street. And this is also corridor typology 1, so design excellence review was automatically required. This project entailed the redevelopment of this existing commercial space into what would be Missoula Ganja Goddess, which is a retail dispensary with some additional office space in it. You want to show the after then. So this is what it looks like now, and honestly, I think it's looks complete, if not open already. And if you drive by it on Brook Street, I think it looks even better in person.
We were planning on having more current day photos for you, and then it snowed a foot or whatever. So we,
I couldn't drive very far today, so apologize. But I definitely recommend next time you're driving down Brooks, taking a look at it. That definitely is a pretty drastic difference from what was there before. And I think the main highlights were just new materials, new forms. There's kind of different heights that added some interest. And this one was approved without any design variation requests. And one thing that came up during this review was a discussion about the parking lot in front of it and the sidewalk. Ideally, we would have achieved that. The parking lot is fairly dangerous and probably shouldn't be there. And the sidewalk that currently exists is about 3 feet wide. But those were factors that were kind of outside of the scope of what could be required during design excellence review. But still kind of got considered as part of this project. Okay, and our last one that I want to talk about today is an O'Reilly Auto Parts on Broadway. I think this is a good example of kind of more like corporate architecture where businesses or franchises have kind of designs that they follow across the nation. So this was an example of how to adapt that to are our specific design codes here. This is corridor typology 3, and it has, this property was interesting because it had street frontages on 3 sides. It's kind of surrounded by Broadway and then Commerce Street and Murphy Street. Next slide, Ben. So this was the very first design that was kind of brought to our team during the preliminary stages. As you can see, there's not a lot of windows, which glazing is a fairly big part of design excellence review. And that was kind of the main sticking point, was the lack of meeting that glazing standard. And the challenge here was that this, as part of the store, it required a fair amount of like internal storage space. So it was a challenge to figure out how to facilitate that, because you can't necessarily have storage up against a window. So how to balance that against providing a more inviting facade that isn't just a blank wall. So fast forward to our what we ultimately approved. Still not the level of glazing that is prescribed by design excellence. So that was a variation that was applied for, but some of the mitigating strategies were vertical landscaping that kind of took the attention away from that blank wall and added more visual interest and just texture in that area. And also some elements of the architecture that added some fenestration without actually adding windows. And I believe that is it. So yeah, Ben and I want to open it up to more discussion. If you have questions about any of the specific examples that we shared, we can walk you through what the process was for those, or whatever other questions you may have.
And we definitely invite follow-up comments or feedback. And just to round things off too, I just want to give a heads up to you on the board, and also just as a general thing to be aware of in the public, or for anyone else who's following this meeting, that it is our intention to provide a more public venue at some point, sooner or later, hopefully sooner, both to kind of present on this and also to be a forum for feedback from the community. So be on the lookout for that. That's been our intention for a while, but for various reasons we haven't been able to get to it yet, but hopefully soon.
Hey, I have a question, if that's okay. First, I just want to say thanks for running through all those projects. That was really great to see, and I really appreciate it. You did a good job of explaining what the intent of the guidelines is. I might be wrong, but did I hear at the beginning, like earlier here, that none of these projects went in front of the design review board? Is that correct?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Ben, I know when you were running through the excellence manual earlier, you touched on this a little bit, but could you talk a little bit more about like what the threshold is, where an applicant might be submitting for a variation, like where's that line where it gets kicked up to the design review board?
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. That there are kind of two mechanisms for projects to be moved to design review. One is kind of from the staff side for your experience, and that would be a referral from us for a project that we might recognize early on, or have indications based on kind of the criteria in that section on how a referral would work. Is it a complex, is the architecture really complex? is it an unusual site or kind of unique site for the project? Is it going to be really controversial as far as being next to a residential development or a high number of design variations? Those are specifically what are called out. But there's nothing in the code. There's one thing in the code that says it automatically goes to DRB, and that is for a unique situation where if the height that's allowed by the base zoning district is less than the street edge height that's called for in the overlay. If a project wanted to expand their project beyond what the base zoning allows, that would automatically go to the design review board. So we haven't gotten any of those yet. It's kind of a unique thing, but otherwise there's nothing that automatically would trigger a project to go to design review to the DRB. The other path to get to the DRB is if an applicant elects to that they would prefer to have their project reviewed by the DRB, or else disagrees with staff's review and wants to appeal it to the DRB. And so, yeah, to answer your question a little bit more again, I don't know if you can hear the vacuum cleaner, but there have been projects where we have brought up the idea of going to the DRB or the suggestion, and there have and to this at this point no one has elected to go to prefer having the project reviewed by the DRB than staff. And I think part of that has to do with what Brandon was talking about earlier, and that there's a and whatnot. And we on the staff side have not referred anything to DRB yet for various reasons. But so yeah, like you saw, again, just looking through those projects, you can see kind of the range of variety between what kind of projects we're looking at, how many of them use request design variations at all. For the ones that do, how significant the design variations can be, even if it's only one. And so we've been, our attempt is to try to be consistent in how we apply our review. And by consistent, I don't mean making the same decision for every project, for the same thing. It's reviewing it based on the context for that project in that place, based on what the guidelines instruct us or how they guide us for that context. I will say, we don't at this point know of any project specifically that is planning to go bring the project to the board, but there are projects that potentially could come to the board sometime in the near future. But again, it's more up to the applicant than not.
I appreciate you guys taking us through and showing the examples, because the last time we saw this, there weren't that many had gone through the process. And so if we keep doing this, even if we don't have a lot of stuff on the docket, but there's that training mechanism and just illustration of the use of the code and everything, I think it'd be good exercise for us, because it'll make us a little more fluent and understand those nuances between what's a staff decision and what should come to the board. Or because from a development standpoint, time is of the essence. Time is money, and predictability. And as Brandon said so well earlier, if we can become not predictable, but something that you just have in the plan and it goes through comfortably, I would prefer not to have to do PUDs and things like that to make better projects. So this is an opportunity. So excited about that.
Yeah, and I think from the staff side, we're trying to get into the habit a little bit more with reviews, where if off the bat it appears like it's apparent that there's going to be a lot of variations, or there's just a lot of complexity surrounding it. We'll try and promote this design review board option early on in the process, almost as a way to be like, we can go through this in several rounds and it'll probably take a few different iterations, or, you know, if this is the design that you're really confident with, like this design review board might be a more efficient route for you.
I'm interested in talking about the Wren project again. And I guess, Ben, could you go back to that slide? I'm just curious to know kind of where the threshold was, kind of piggybacking on what Levi said. And just from a designer's point of view, looking at the stark difference between what they came with and what they ended with, and wondering, posing a question on whether, you know, the process itself sort of stifled creativity in the process, where, you know, that first design, although, you know, not getting too subjective about it, but it was fairly creative in this way. I'm not suggesting one design or the other. I'm saying that, you know, clearly the architect, I know who the architect is, I don't know them personally, but they're out of Bozeman. They purposefully completely changed their concept through this process. And I'm just wondering if, you know, if that was desired, how you guys thought about that, or was that really driven by staff to say we've got to scrap this mansard roof idea or this angular roof shape? Because just from a designer standpoint, I look at that angled roof shape and I say, okay, that's a little bit creative for a downtown approach, but you look at the swooped roof shape on the Fantasy building, and from a contextual relationship, those two design decisions are almost identical in their atypicalness to the downtown character. And one project was not approved and one project was. And I suppose, I guess, just want to understand staff's thinking on that, and how to be sort of fair to all parties, and not promote both designers, developers, owners, for lack of a better word, watering down the creativity, you know, making so where the process that was built to promote that creativity is, by whatever, you know, whatever reason, is being stifled by, you know, we're all kind of getting in the way, so to speak. And so, you know, it's an evolving thing. I think that, you know, we're all trying to figure this out. But I'm just curious, because when I haven't seen this original rendering, but I've of course seen the final rendering in the papers. So this one struck me as pretty drastic in its change from its concept to its final rendition.
Yeah,
just wondering if you had thoughts.
I can speak to that a little bit. And Emily, I don't know if you have experience with either of these ones. I can't remember. I'm a little hesitant to try. I don't want to misstate what the decisions were based on for those elements. And you really see how quickly these projects can get convoluted or get confusing on how to report on and evaluate. But I guess you know, one of our goals and one of our tasks on the review side is to exactly, that's a great example of kind of how what consistency means in the overlay. And that one of the things that is really interesting about this work, and also challenging, is that rather than each standard living separately as its own consideration, all of these we try to evaluate the design in consideration and of the rest of the project and to the other elements that affect it and that complement it or that conflict with it. And so I can't say for sure why, comparing this roof to the one on across the street ended differently, but there were definitely other some considerations that were at play on the Ren that were not at play at the one across the street, and vice versa, and the combination of those led to and I will say, yeah, on the Ren, that was a staff driven, I would say staff reaction that led to a change in that design based on our take of what it was doing to the building that was there and how it was affecting the Elks Lodge, on the other side, and that building is like right on the property line, so anything added to it was going out into the right of way, and so there are questions of getting easement for that, that bump out there and whatnot. And I'm not saying that those are why it was changed. I just that's what I remember from that conversation on that building as being at play. And then
Ben,
yeah,
just to be a little bit fair to staff, I went to school with the developers, architects over there, so I know a little bit, but not a lot. And I don't think everything was based on design review and design excellence. I mean, there were some significant structural issues, and that building was a nasty beast, basically, from my understanding. And so I think they had to make some shifts because of that too. And I can't speak to it. I didn't talk to them directly about it, but one thing I've offered on our projects, or if anybody else could, is to do postmortems after, kind of the before and after. How did it feel? What was the result? Were the design changes? Were there impacts? If projects could kind of be picked apart a little bit that way, like if Scott, if they were happy to sit down and talk about it, I mean, we could learn something from a postmortem. And I'm not saying the Ren needs to do it, but like the Blackfoot Outfitters might be a good example. What was challenging? Because I know when we first started, it was hard to understand how to communicate to you guys, and so we kind of worked through some of that, and then maybe there's some revision back and forth that would be a good thing to explore, but just something to think about.
Yeah, and that's
a really good idea.
Yeah, and that's the kind of feedback, I guess, when I think of trying to bring this to some kind of public forum where we can get feedback, that's the kind of thing I have in mind. But if you have ideas for things like that, or ways for us to improve and to engage on that would be great to hear. It's one of the things, again, that we're probably that we're thinking about and we'll be continuing to is that what does it mean if a project needs a lot of design variations? Is that a sign that the project isn't following the overlay, or is it the sign that there are standards that don't fit what's...
That's the one that kind of strikes me as maybe another mechanism to get more stuff through the design review board too, is those design variations are very subjective. And maybe there's a threshold there if there's a certain amount of those. I don't know how that gets updated or changed in the how things get kicked over to design review board, but that just seems something that would be good to have the collective collective board to review if it hits a certain threshold or something along those lines. And maybe that's up to you guys to make that decision, since you're the ones that do the referral. But just a thought there is that that's something that maybe we could have some impact on.
Yeah.
I have a couple suggestions. If we're just building on what you guys are talking about in terms of getting folks to come and use the design review board, would this be a good time to mention them? Okay. The first one is the possibility of having an off-the-record pre-meeting with the design review board, just to get like any kind of feedback and heads up on stuff, and also helpful suggestions. you know, it's like a little bit of a think tank, this group, and might be some nice ideas that could come out of that that would help developers in creating a really great project without any commitment. So a kind of fear-free meeting. So that's one thing. Another would be possibly when they come to us to ask them what they'd like feedback with, as far as besides the variances and things like that, if they have anything that they would like our help with, sort of like a little mini charrette type service that the city, in a sense, is offering developers, since we're not otherwise getting used. And then the last thing was, I don't know how Emily and Ben, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but and maybe you're already planning on doing this, maybe you have been doing this, but the idea of you sitting in as part of the design review board at first, sort of like training wheels on the board, so that it feels like there's this, you know, protection and transition for developers, feel like they're in a safe place. And also you guys will, you know, have your good advice that you can kind of get the board up and running in a way that feels right for the development services. So those are the ideas.
Yeah, I like that comment about the almost like the pre-app situation where it's not an approval, but it's some feedback, because the pre-app seems like maybe almost the most important time to maybe bring up some of these issues, right? Before they are actually coming to get their approval. So I was thinking about that too, if it could be tied somehow to that, but so that's a good comment, I think.
That pre-app process is what Whitefish does. You can informally go in front of the board and to have a conversation about the design. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I was going to echo that, Brandon. We took a multifamily project through, and we did very schematic before a lot of time and money was spent on the actual design, ran it through, got the feedback, and it made the second approval process really easy. It was a really positive experience.
Thank you. That's great feedback. Well, we've been holding you here for a while. Does anyone else have any comments or anything? Any questions?
Thanks for listening to us, Ben, Emily.
Yeah, seriously. You guys thanks for the back and forth.
Yeah.
Oh no, we appreciate it, and that's really great things for us to hear.
And if any follow-up questions come up after the fact, both our emails are at the end of this presentation if you want to reach out, and we can always continue a conversation that way.
I have a simple little question. Is it possible to get a hard copy of the standards and guidelines, or is that just online? I just like the physical thing. I can write in it and stuff.
Yeah,
we talked about that.
we were gonna get those printed for you guys, that we were thinking of doing that, and then realized this was an all virtual thing, and we couldn't just drop them off at the meeting. Amanda, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but I'm sure if anybody on the board wants a printed copy, our office can provide that.
Okay.
And
so the document is available through the agenda link. So if you have a printer at home, otherwise, if you would maybe, even if you email Ben, Emily, or myself with your physical address, we could definitely print it off to you and put it in the mail.
Yeah, and Amanda, Emily, and we'll talk about that and figure out the budget side of it and all that. And then
well, I'm an old dog learning new tricks in this virtual world, so I'll keep mine electronic. But I think the offer is, and I'll try to behave and not print. But it would be nice to have those references at our fingertips.
It's handy to have it to flip through, because that's a pretty big. They're both pretty big documents. So.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. It's definitely helpful to have a paper copy.
One last question, I guess. Have you guys gone through some of the projects that created all this and checked to see if they meet the guidelines or the standards?
Yeah,
Well,
we talked about enforcement. How is it? Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, are you talking about the kind of the projects of conversation that led to the making the overlay?
Yeah.
We did during the project development we evaluated some of those projects based on what we had developed as the standards and everything up to that point. So we haven't gone back with the final version and looked at them, but we did do that for a few that were in some of those presentations. If you're interested, I can try to track that down and send it to you there.
I was just curious because I've heard kind of some people maybe say that, oh, this wouldn't even these projects could have got through this means or whatever. So just I was wondering if that's been looked at all to see if it's actually doing what it's meant to do.
Yeah, it's a good, we haven't. I mean, I think that there's kind of two sides to that. You know, one is, are the standards right? But the other is we have a whole new process, and I think that they go hand in hand. And and so even if just looking through the chart, you know, it might not look like it would necessarily change things that much for some of these projects because of that process and that kind of more comprehensive look or way to review a project that I would think that it would have changed the laws. I mean, yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Go that far at this. And then Heather, you were asking about kind of compliance and follow up on these projects that have gone through the overlay, and you know, we're just kind of getting to that point of where they're actually getting near completion and everything. But yeah, that's a really important part of this.
Is it tied to a?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, the building inspectors have rough jobs anyway, but to inspect for things that qualitative things you guys are assessing, that's a really hard thing to look for. I mean, because there's nuances between permitted designs and drawings and then what shows up in the field, right? And that's hard enough. So I guess I'm just curious as if you've seen any abuse of it, or I know that there's some people who have kind of gotten around the sign ordinance in the past, and this is a bigger example of that. And how do you enforce it, I guess, is the question.
It's something we're talking about for sure.
Yeah, we haven't really had any that have gotten to the
complete part
level. And yeah, it's definitely an ongoing discussion of how and what that looks like. And really, our best tool right now is once they get to the building permit stage, us as the reviewers have to be really intentional about what kind of conditions we put on it or notes to really call out, like, this needs to be like this. You know, all these design excellence standards have to be met in this way, or things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So hopefully that works. We'll find out.
Work in process.
Yeah.
We're you know, yes, it's a work in process, and I think this will be kind of an evolutionary kind of a case of constantly fine tuning and evolving as we go, and that's definitely one of the areas that we'll need that.
Great.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Emily, for the presentation. And I guess we'll move on at this point. And so, following the agenda, are there any other General comments from board members? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to adjournment. Amanda, do we just need a motion to adjourn?
Nope, we can go ahead and just call the meeting adjourned at 8:13.
Okay, well, thank you everyone, and welcome to all the new members, and welcome back, Brandon. And thank you everyone for being patient with me, stumbling my way through this. One other time, I had to fill in as chair because both the chair and vice chair were gone, and I had a member from the public yelling at me at one point. So I'm glad this went smoother. So thank you, everyone, and meeting is adjourned. We'll see you in a month.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.